Hi, I'm Graham K. Miles from 13 Goats and BlankTV, and I have the pleasure today of joining John Kevill from seminal new wave thrash band Warbringer. John?
Nice to see you, man.
Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be sitting down with you to chat.
Likewise, man.
So I have been not only doing interviews for the station and playing in my own band for a little while, but I've also been a pretty big Warbringer fan for a few years. The album that really put you guys on the radar for me was Weapons of Tomorrow. I know that's pretty recent, but I've since then gone through your back catalog and listened to a lot of stuff. And I did have a question for you. Do you write the lyrics?
Just about all of it, yeah. Occasionally I'll reach out to a bandmate to give me a little help with this or that idea, but 95% of it's all me.
Well, I'm glad I'm talking to you then, because the lyrics on this album, the lyrics on all your records feel really poignant to me, very universal, but also pretty topical. And I feel like on this last record, you've sort of leaned more towards stuff that might be interpreted as relevant to current events. Is that fair to say?
100%, yeah. I look at it this way. Okay, I'm screaming into a microphone. This music's really pissed off. That begs the question, why? What are we so pissed off about? What's our problem? And so it behooves me to kind of tell you about it. So the main themes in the band, the overarching theme, I would say, is power in its various forms through often, I'd say a lot of the war stuff is me looking at history and going, oh God, it's horrifying. Why is this the best we can do as a civilization? God damn it. Ah. And then this record in particular has a lot of social, inner self, inner psyche and response to social conditions kind of stuff that I do think is very topical and relevant to our time. And I think that is in line with the thrash metal genre in general. One of the things I thought for a while is they would say, when we started, we were a retro thrash band, and I look at old thrash metal, old 80s punk and hardcore and whatever, and if we take the most stereotypical thrash metal images, it would be industrial plant spewing toxic waste, a city getting nuked, and et cetera, et cetera. And then people in the streets dying and corrupt politicians or leaders going ha 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 ha, and all of that stuff is stock stereotypical thrash metal themes. I'm like, which one of those problems got fixed?
Right.
That's all shit from when I was either a baby or young or whatever, and all of that stuff is as bad or worse than it was then. So why, so as far as I'm concerned, if you just play straight down the middle with thrash metal themes, it's basically still relevant.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I think I've always seen you guys as sort of updating a lot of those classic takes on themes that were relevant 20 years ago or 30 years ago and are still relevant today. My favorite song by you guys used to be Firepower Kills. I still think that's a fucking banger. To me, that's the millennial answer to Fight Fire with Fire by Metallica.
Sure.
But I have to say, since the new record came out, I think a really strong contender for favorite track for me is probably A Better World. And I just wanted to quickly chat about some of the lyrics to that composition.
Okay, I got some stuff to say about that one.
Yeah, because you've got, the chorus. That empty sinking feeling deep in my soul, no, a better kind of world is not possible. It cannot be done beyond my control. No, a better kind of world is not possible. To me, when I hear that, it seems like you guys are targeting that sense of cynicism that has entered modern day politics, the voter apathy, the sense that no matter what you do, there's no way that you can have an impact on these oppressive systems we all have to live in. But I wonder, am I editorializing or...
No, you're dead right. In fact, there's this book, I was trying to kind of bottle this social theory concept I read called Capitalist Realism by Mark Fisher, 2009, written after the big bank bailout and financial crash of that era that fucked my generation pretty bad. And it's sort of this, the tagline quote from that is, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism, right? The idea that we're gonna, if you want a picture of the future, imagine the present, but worse.
Well, look where we are now.
Exactly.
Look how many people can't imagine the tomorrow that is racing to meet us.
Oh, absolutely. And also I noticed, too, even if we look at, science fiction, if you look at, say, original Star Trek, it's very utopic. The Federation has solved a lot of core human issues like, warfare between people and wealth inequality and political corruption. Star Trek Federation isn't really plagued by those things the way we are.
Right.
But if you look at sci-fi from like the 80s and later, which
like
the 80s, when we begin, exactly.
Yeah,
precisely, which I put in the record.
I caught it.
If we begin it with like what we call the neoliberal era, which we're still in, then basically you can only imagine a worse future where it's like, oh, well, we'll go from being citizens to corporate serfs, and that transformation is somewhere in progress right now, I think.
I'd say we're probably nearing the end of neoliberalism as we know it, the sort of death knell. Something worse is probably around the corner as far as I'm concerned. But
the word that I've heard for that is called techno-feudalism, and that was like when I'm like commissioning the art for this record and stuff, I'm throwing that word at them to kind of find a visual style for it, because I think that I think that's basically true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think people face these decision points in moments of crisis where you either yearn for a utopic future that often can't be achieved and the reality is much darker, or you yearn for a return to an idealized, glorified past that never existed. I'm in a band called 13 Goats. We're a death metal band, and we use this sort of Animal Farm metaphor. So, the end of humanity, the reversion of men into beasts,
right.
As we reach for, that sort of idealized pastoral existence that we imagine the past was, forgetting that it was brutal, that, that it was... a Wild West, right, where might was right and people died if they couldn't cope. And I think today, you sort of see both ends of that continuum coming full circle in some ways, with these people who are promising us a better tomorrow, but the methods by which they're trying to bring it about are, frankly, barbaric.
Sure, I would agree, and I think, in regards to Animal Farm, and one of the interesting things that gets lost in there, because of course it's a metaphor for Stalinism and everything, but Orwell was a socialist too.
Right.
And what's the ultimate failure of the Animal Farm experiment at the end of the book is that the pigs turn into people. And the people and the farmers represent the oppressive order they were trying to rebel against in the first place.
Every revolutionary becomes the thing they despise.
Well, and that's the thing that goes into that concept of that song, A Better World, is the idea, well, if you don't believe you can fix anything either via reform or revolution, those are two ways, then, well, you're just doomed.
So are you...
And kind of this acceptance of... the worsening conditions of the world. And then what I'm really trying to hit out with that song is like the personal aspects of, okay, so that's the big picture, that's the political reality of the world or whatever. What's it mean for me? And what it means for me is like, oh, I'm sorry, wife, we can't have kids because we're being so efficiently profit maximized off of, and they're going to be better at it next year, and they'll get more out of us for rent and for insurance and whatever else, and our wage will be about the same, and that time out of our life, our figurative blood being spent, that won't go to us pursuing our passions or whatever, or things we want, and the kind of that mixing of the political big picture and the personal and interpersonal small picture has been in the songs Better World and Cage of Air. Mm-hmm. So in Better World, the guy talks about his own like inner depression, how he's trying to like numb himself and everything and just like keep ahead and keep running the treadmill because he has to. And I think that stuff makes it click. So I think for like riff wise, I think that song kind of like is basically one riff set. It does make you feel like you're stuck on a loop or a hamster wheel, which is kind of like the point. Yeah. But that song's really written about around the lyric in particular. When I pitched it to my band, I'm like, the song's called A Better World. Like, that doesn't sound brutal. I'm like, but it is. Just you watch.
So follow-up question, are those lyrics satirical for you, or do they resonate with you on a personal level, or is it a bit of both? Because sometimes it feels like you're taking the piss out of people who feel like everything is futile and hopeless and they won't fight for change. But sometimes it also feels like you're acknowledging that we all feel tired and exhausted by this constant hamster wheel that we're stuck in.
I think that if I were to bet, I don't have a rosy prediction. Because one of the things that really troubles me about our time is that in the last 20 years or so, that we found that you can basically ignore peaceful protest is supposed to be the way we change things and demand change, but they ignored Occupy Wall Street. Black Lives Matter happened, and we got a boulevard with that as the name. We didn't get police reform. Police still shoot people when they shouldn't. at a not much lesser rate as far as I can tell. We bailed out the bankers, nothing happened. We protested Gaza and nothing happened. We're protesting tariffs and stuff now. They're gonna fucking keep doing it.
Deportations.
They're gonna keep doing it. So no, it's more straight on the nose, really. That is kind of how I feel, and I hope to be wrong. I fucking hope to be wrong, but just being honest about that feeling and not having the asterisk and then the people rise up and change it, which so often gets into art and music because that feels good. Just not having that at all felt more like honest to me, and I think that resonates in a really different way because it's just about like looking that devil in the eyes, so to speak, and acknowledging it like, oh shit, things are that bad. We are looking at a worsening future with no seeming way to fix it. You know, the climate's a huge part of that, and then like the social contract in at least the Western world, which is the part I know, is worsening as well. And so, and it seems like if anything, the oligarchs are going to win. You know, they're winning nonstop. And the thing about peaceful protests is you can ignore it because all the peasants got to go home back to work because they got to pay their rent. So they can stand there in the square and there can be inspiring speeches and slogans, and they are very inspiring and bold, and they do speak truth to power, and they do raise awareness and all the stuff you're supposed to do, and it's all true and it's all correct in my opinion, or at least most of it. And then the oligarchs like, haha, that's cute. Go back to work, you peasant. You have to. I don't even have to say anything.
That's something I get frustrated with all the time, you know. All of us online talking about how the world is ending and someone better do something, but then we get up and we have our coffee and we go sit down at our fucking remote jobs and we put up with it.
What else are you gonna do? Be homeless?
Exactly.
You know, exactly. They have you by the balls, as George Carlin said. Like, what are you gonna do? The only thing, I mean, like, that I can think is basically revolutionary violence at this point. And that's not because I want it. That's because the peaceful protest thing isn't working. That would be my preferred method.
This is a number about terrorism and assassination, something we could use more of today. The Black Hand reaches out! Are you fuckers gonna stand there?
You know, you said earlier you hoped you were wrong about the way the world is going, and I hope you are too. Otherwise it's going to get fucking dark, but I appreciate your willingness to be honest. I think that's what metal's about, you know? It's about telling hard truths when people need to hear them.
Yeah, and if you're pissed, why? I thought, around Woe to the Vanquished, I'm like, you know, I feel like some of the bands I see with the fucking Venom Bathory imagery recycled for the 1000th time, which when those bands did it, I felt like was a legitimate reaction to an evangelical culture, and it doesn't really exist as much anymore, though.
Yeah, nobody's scared of Satan now.
Right,
unless they're in, in a particular part of the Bible Belt.
Sure, but basically, and I'm like, that's impotent. That's not, like, actually evil.
Right.
You want to talk real evil, let's talk about human beings and what they do to each other.
Yeah.
So I'm a humanitarian. I consider myself a scientific humanitarian. Most Warbringer lyrics are very much coming from the opposite angle of, like, woe to the vanquished is the Roman conqueror, going like, this, we're going to wipe your people out, we're going to make you like us, and you'll pay our taxes so we can do it to the next people. Ha ha ha.
The sword and the cross.
Sword and the cross, same thing. The Lord's going, I will own you, peasant, forever, and this is why you actually believe the church that I built, you fucking idiot. I'm going to own your children's children,
Yeah, and my sons will be your lords.
Exactly. Yeah, and the idea too, what that's supposed to do is it's not about the Crusades or something. It references it, but it's more about how did the lords become the lords in the first place. That's what the two verses are about, and then the end is, we don't have feudalism anymore, but we have a power structure that may as well be lords and serfs, and but we don't acknowledge it or see it that way, or at least not everyone does yet, though I think it's increasing.
You talked earlier, before we turned the camera on, about how effective propaganda has become, and I think that's part of it, right? Is you can have feudalism, but you can't tell people it's feudalism. You have to tell them they're the freest fucking people on planet Earth.
If it works, right? Or I often say, once upon a time, the lords legitimize themselves by saying they're chosen by God, the same God that the serfs believed in, so that legitimated it, and there'd be this otherworldly reward and whatever. And here, it's legitimated by this kind of like free market mythos of like, well, you didn't invent e-commerce, so Jeff Bezos deserves to be 100 billion times wealthier than you, because he has that much merit and that much innovation.
Right, and his money makes him good and pure.
Right, exactly. And money as a signifier of wealth, which goes into like Calvinism and the roots of America there. That's a different discussion. But that's an interesting one for me. And that idea of like, well, and also I've had people say like, what do you mean Elon Musk isn't the smartest guy in the world? If you were that smart, you'd be rich too. Like, where it's like, it's some pretty circular logic there. Yeah. But then you look at these people and you just listen to them talk and you're like, I know guys smarter than this, maybe less sociopathic, maybe less advantageously positioned, but none of the modern lords do I think like, oh yeah, they absolutely should be in their station, that's good for the world. Hell, even if we're going away from a moral argument, there's a basic efficiency of resource allocation argument that if you have these individual motherfuckers with the GDP of a small country, that's just a bad distribution of human resources to meet human needs.
Inefficient for a guy who's always talking about efficiency.
For sure. Furthermore, you can't have a democracy if there's immense concentrations of private wealth, because they'll do exactly what they've done and buy the fucking system.
Yeah.
I know America better than Canada, but there's a Princeton study about American politics sometime in the last 10, 15 years that says the voting preferences of the lower 9/10 of the American public has zero measurable impact on policy. And I think that just tells you, like, okay, if you still think this is a democracy, you're fucking asleep. You're a fool. This is an oligarchic plutocracy. That's what it is. And it's just got the Wizard of Oz trappings of having a democracy. And there's no shadowy they. It's like, it's actually boring. It's a fucking spreadsheet. The they is the shareholders.
Yeah.
It's
Citizens United.
Right. It's not some shadowy Illuminati cabal. It's not aliens. That would be a lot more sexy and entertaining, but it's a fucking, like, boring dystopic conspiracy. It's not even a conspiracy. It's right in front of you,
Let's do some fun questions. Lots of dates left on this tour. You guys are going down into the States after Vancouver, and then you're headed off to Europe later, right?
Yep, we got U.S.A, Europe. Europe is the 3 tours we got booked right now. U.S.A early spring, Europe late spring, Europe summer. When I say U.S.A, I mean U.S. Canada, by the way, because it'd be a fool not to. We might be doing some more of that later, and we might do some Australia or Southeast Asia towards the end of the year. And generally, we're just trying to tour the shit out of this record.
Is there a place you're most looking forward to playing?
So I've been damn near everywhere by this point, and my answer is kind of like this. My favorite show is the one I'm about to play, because the motherfuckers in front of me tonight paid to be there, and I owe it to the people. Tonight, my favorite city is Vancouver, and tomorrow it's Portland.
What's it been like to play with these bands, with Someone in the Lich, who is a really cool band, not super well known yet, but the drummer in my band fucking loves them. Allegion. I always get it wrong.
Yeah.
And then Skeletal Remains. 3 very cool bands. 3 bands that make sense together on a bill, I think, with you guys.
Yeah.
Have you had any good stories so far?
Generally, it's okay. This tour's called The Vortex of Violence. We're trying to do some mashup between Allegion's new album, The Ossuary Lens, and Ours, Wrath, and Ruin. None of those titles were catchy, so I'm like, let's just have a cool metal title. So one of them suggested Vortex of Violence. I'm like, yeah, that is exactly what this tour is. There is, I was trying to go, how many snare drum hits do you think happen in a night of this tour? It's a lot. All 4 bands are really brutal. We're kind of like, I guess, the least extreme band from one perspective, although if you see our show, you might not think that.
You guys are high energy, but you are that kind of classic thrash influence that you talked about earlier.
Yeah, we're not a death metal band. The other 3 are all death metal bands.
But I will say, you guys have some elements that are a little heavier than you find in a lot of thrash, especially, I think, a lot of the thrash that you guys are inspired by.
We're definitely influenced by, I'd say, the more extreme end of the thrash genre, more than, the more, melodic end. More Creator and Sodom than Metallica and Testament, although not those bands,
Well, your early stuff, to me, kind of sounds, I'm talking about like the Waking into Nightmares era.
Yeah.
Sounds a little bit like Zetro era Exodus. You guys might be one of my favorite new wave thrash bands. I also really love Power Trip. Do you guys have a favorite from the classic era?
Oh, there's a whole bunch of them. I don't know if I have a single favorite, but the go-to records that I always say are my kind of bread and butter for specifically the kind of thrash we're doing is stuff like, I would say, Demolition Hammer's second album in particular, first album as well, though. First 5 creators, Sodom in general, like second Dark Angel record, I like shit like Morbid Saint and stuff, just the whole vicious end of thrash. And then some more of the classic Bay Area stuff, more of the heavier end and more vicious end of the Bay Area, more like my Exodus and Violence type of shit, you know?
Yeah.
Kind of the heavier and more aggressive end of the thrash metal spectrum. And then also we lean into some like classic death metal and black metal stuff here and there as well.
Yeah.
Basically, I like metal and the core styles of metal, like the whole thing from when Iommi played the tritone all the way up to where you have death and black metal in their established genres, give or take the mid-90s, and then selected bands after that.
Sweet. So you listen to a wide variety of different subgenres, and you let that into the sound.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it would be silly to not, I feel like. It's
Agreed.
like if I only ate one food. I can have a favorite food. That doesn't mean that's all I want to eat, you know? So
Funny story, I actually saw Demolition Hammer in a really small venue that I don't think it exists anymore. It was St. Vitus in Brooklyn, which is...
Oh, it doesn't? Yeah, I've heard about it. I never got to play it. It was great, apparently.
That really sucks. I used to dream, you know, after I moved out here, I thought, you know, one day I'll, you know, start a band and we'll go back to New York and we'll play St. Vitus Bar, but it's gone now. But I walked in there one night and Demolition Hammer was playing. It was like a secret show, I think. Packed, small room.
Oh, brutal.
But really, really good. Yeah, the floor, nobody standing still. This is going to seem like a dumb question, but I had to ask because of the classic thrash influence, do you guys have a favorite Big Four band? Do you, personally?
I go with Slayer.
All right. That
Which
makes
I
sense.
think makes sense given what we do. Like, I'm more that style. I'm more like a barker than a singer. Slayer, especially like early Slayer, is just relentlessly fast and evil.
What's the most important thing that you've learned over the years about making a record?
I think we've become a lot more just like refined and targeted, and a lot of what we've learned isn't necessarily like a conscious thing I could even express to you. It's like how if you surfed or skated or rode a bike like many times, you just do it better. This was my first band.
Yeah.
So I had no idea what I was doing on the first record, which kind of shows, but in a cool way, because I'm just really feral on the first couple of records. I listen back to that, I'm like, geez, well, I didn't know what I was doing. I don't have much technique or anything, but goddamn, I sound really pissed.
That's why we love the early shit, right? That's why we love raw work from bands before they broke really big, because they had nothing except their belief in themselves and, you know, their willingness to go and do something kind of crazy.
Yeah, so I think it's been mostly like the journey of this band's been like, okay, we start with an album with a big spiky logo and like a tank and 4 nuclear explosions and like 2 giant satans and a pile of skulls. So like that's our basis, all right? So we can't, I'm not ever gonna like start playing like groove or like alt rock or whatever off of that. The band's called Warbringer, spiky logo, it's gotta beat the shit out of you. That's like the central guiding star. And then what we've been trying to do is refine that as much as possible and make it as interesting as possible, kind of lean every way we can within that basic identity to just keep it interesting for ourselves first. And I figure if it's interesting ourselves, it might be to the audience.
I think it's definitely interesting. I think you guys are very fresh with every new release, staying on the ball, and I think saying some things that it's nice to hear articulated in metal music again at a time when, like we were saying earlier, a lot of the genre's fans seem to be willfully apolitical, and you guys are really bucking the trend in that regard, which I appreciate.
I think it's necessary. I think it's like a little... just to say, be like, oh, it's just silly fun or whatever. For me, I used to say it to myself this way. Like, if you want to have, like, a silly, tongue-in-cheek record, you can have a damn good record, but you probably top out at, like, an 8 out of 10. Mm-hmm. You got to get serious if you want to reach for the 10 out of 10, because you got to, like, hit it something heavier.
Fair enough.
And there's many angles you can do that with. So some of our stuff is, like, interpersonal, emotional stuff, which also some songs like, say, Defiance of Fate or something from the last record that I think isn't always reached for in the thrash or the extreme metal genres.
Well, one thing you guys do a lot, though, is, like, you're serious, but you're also kind of playful. A lot of wordplay in the lyrics, I find. You know, a kind of, like, jabbing the listener in the ribs, right? Like a knowing wink. Would you guys say you do have a sense of humor about the writing process?
I wouldn't say it's so much humor. I would say it's more, like, sardonic and sarcastic. There's a level of balance of, like, you want people to be able to understand what you're trying to say or talk about, but then you also don't want to come off all like wake up sheeple or whatever either. So there's a line to walk there.
For sure.
And also I just like wordplay.
Yeah.
So that's just what I try to do naturally. Like the end of Firepower Kills is like one of my favorite bits for that, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, it's I think rather than being like, you know, weapons development is bad, to kind of say the inverse of it, of we'll build a brighter future with it, with that sarcastic evilness.
Well, I love
it's
that,
like,
that image at the end, right? In a blinding flash of light, the future looks so bright.
Yeah,
right?
that's the good
mushroom
word.
cloud, the nuclear explosion. Like, I see, to me, that's very funny.
It's like, so I don't think of it as like funny when I write. If you do think it's funny, great, enjoy it any way you like. But I'm just like, to me, that sounds like sinister.
It's both.
That's how it comes off.
It's like, it's like you're like a twisted circus ringleader being like, look at this great thing I have for you. Psych, it's going to fuck you up.
Right. Yeah, and often I would explain our band to people sometimes, like sort of the artistic MO is like, it's sort of like hippie music in reverse. The hippies once said, like, how great would it be if we had peace and love, and a band like us is going like, we don't!
That's kind of metal music, though, right? It is sort of the opposite of, like, the fucking flower child, like, hippie movement, Woodstock and whatever. But metal people, as far as I know, like, most of us are among the nicest, well-adjusted people I've ever met.
I think that having the outlet of furiously pissed off music to kind of vent some of that helps.
Yeah.
I see people wearing, like, proper clothes and stuff, like yelling at the cashier because they got a fucking minor detail of their order wrong, and I don't do it. I'm just like, Jesus Christ, well, how much anguish must you have inside to act that fucking way, right?
You seem pretty chill for a guy who screams about nuclear war and, and historical violence all the time.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, but, like, if you know about that stuff, it should, I think, like, trouble you on some level. I got all into learning about it, and then I'm like, oh God, and I try to channel that into the band and have an outlet for it, and it gives me some artistic thing to go for that's of myself and my own stuff I know and whatever. So yeah, I think it's healthy in that regard. Yeah, I do.
Last question for you.
All right.
Your lyrics are very clear, I think, and pretty unambiguous, but is there anything that you want to say to the world right now, or maybe just to Canada, or just to America?
Hang in there. When I was writing Say a Better World, I got really depressed about the stuff I'm talking about, and I've been learning how to try to, like, compartmentalize the good stuff of my inner life. I'm deeply thankful for, like, I have a wonderful wife and home. The bank still owns our ass, but we're gonna win someday, I swear. I have this band that I get to travel. I'm in Vancouver now. I'm gonna have to play a show for people. I'm gonna eat something, and it will be probably pretty good, I've been trying to, like, really lean into a daily appreciation of that, while still at the same time not, like, softening my anger towards the stuff that I think I should rightly be angry about. So I've been trying to, like, kind of compartmentalize those two things, because I don't want to let my anger and depression about the state of things and questions about my own future and my wife and I, and should we even have a kid and bring them into this and all that heavy shit, I don't want that to make me like a worse person to the guy I meet on the street. So I've really been working on that with myself, and I guess I'll leave you with that since we've been discussing so much of this.
So you might say better to think about the moments of today instead of the...
Oh God, the weapons of tomorrow, yes.
Yeah! All right.
Hey, this is John Kevill from Warbringer, and right now you are blankly staring at BlankTV, dangerous music for dangerous people.